Now that I think about it, what exactly is the general opinion of analog horror? Cause for me, I just see it as one massive mixed bag. We have some really good examples, with my go-to being the Magnus Archives, but then we also have some really bad examples like the Paranormal Activity movies. I think the problem is the fact that this is a really hard subgenre to get right, with the pros of the subgenre being that it all comes off as really realistic, as if you're looking over found footage or found audio, giving you a sense of relatability that puts you in the situation as the characters. But that ends up being a massive con whenever the characters are being written like fucking idiots, which causes a massive disconnect with the audience whenever characters start making decisions that nobody in their right mind would make. There's also a really massive inherent problem whenever it comes to the pacing, which again can be a pro whenever it's building up suspense and gives off the impression of realistic found footage. But if you don't cut out the audio and footage properly and linger on a scene for way too long, the audience is going to lose their patience and demand that you get to the damn point already. And on top of all of that, there's also a side con on both of those that could go in the opposite direction, where characters are way too well written and the film is edited so neatly that it can't come off as found footage, which ruins the experience whenever the entire point of it is trying to convince you that it's real. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a fan of this kind of horror anyway. Don't get me wrong, I get the appeal, especially whenever the illusion is done so well that it actually fools you into making you think it's realistic. But I've never fallen for the illusion in any of these projects. And my personal type of horror is the kind that has a story to it. It has a story, it has characters, and it uses fear as a tool in order to get me to think about something in a certain way. Analog horror by its nature doesn't do that. There are exceptions, but most of them don't really follow the idea of a 3-act structure. And if it does, it breaks the illusion of being found footage and it's no longer analog. For me, the appeal of analog is the idea of realism being able to sell the scares, making you ask, what would you do in this situation if you were there? This is why so many of the characters in the majority of these stories have next to no actual 3-dimensional personalities. They're blank slates given minor personality traits, that way the audience can insert themselves into the narrative. Either that or the personalities are vague enough to give off the idea of realism so the audience feels like they're seeing real footage of something that actually happened, which doesn't work on a guy like me because I like my horror to actually have a narrative and a plot, with characters I can get emotionally attached to and ideas and themes that I can get really invested in case it wasn't obvious. I'm not saying analog horror is a lost genre that doesn't have any appeal in the modern day. I just think that it's a really tricky genre that a lot of people fuck up very easily, and it really has a bad habit of just testing my patience way too much. And modern versions are just fucking weak because they keep using it as an excuse to write more creepypasta. Oh my god, I finally get to talk about this. Do you realize what you've just unleashed? I have been wanting to make a video about this for so goddamn long, but I never did because I was certain that nobody would want to hear me talk about it. I have made it very clear over the past few months that I am not a fan of modern horror and the rise of creepypasta. But there is one thing in it that I keep seeing over and over again that eats me alive at the back of my head every single time I try to go to sleep. From the SCP Foundation to found footage on YouTube to the amazing digital circus. Guys, what the fuck is this design and why do we keep using it? This is easily one of the most boring things I've ever seen in my entire life, and for some reason, all of you are terrified of it. And in the most blunt way that I could possibly say this, I don't get why. Now, some of you are probably hearing me and just thinking that I'm talking out of my ass here, which would be a fair take except for one detail you're not aware of. Guys, I'm a character designer. All of my study in art and storytelling is all based on character design and expressing personality. From facial expressions to body posture to hairstyle, even the clothes that they wear. Each are important elements that tell you all about a character just by looking at them. On a first glance, a good character design should immediately implant information into your head about their personality or at least their background. And this methodology also applies to monsters too. And they're always the most fun to design because primarily they're the ones with the most exaggerated features. Whether that's symbolic representative of the narrative or just a cool feature that makes the monster look better. No matter the type of media, a monster's design should immediately be telling you something about it and how dangerous it is. So whenever I look at this design, what the hell am I supposed to gain out of it? What is it telling me? What stories lies beneath its skin? Simple. Nothing! No matter what kind of backstory or lore you're able to come up with for this thing, none of it is going to be expressed whenever this is what I'm looking at. Did you know that this thing is supposed to be an angel? Yeah, with the amazing digital circus, they had a story within a story, and this thing is revealed to be an angel of God. Can't you tell? Oh, okay, then what about this thing? Is that also an angel? Nope, that thing's called a rake, and it's from a creepypasta series on YouTube. Oh, okay, then what about this thing from the SCP Foundation? Oh, no, we don't actually know what that thing is. Are you starting to see the problem now? All of these use the exact same design design and none of them express what the monster is. Now, you could make the argument that the design is supposed to not be revealing any information for you, because that leaves a lot of mystery and makes you more terrified of what it's capable of. Except that argument doesn't work whenever better designs do the exact same thing, and your lore dump about the creature ranges from paragraphs to pages long. Look, I love horror and I love monsters, but this design needs to fucking die. It's not interesting, it's not scary, and it doesn't leave room for any kind of mystery. All it shows to me is a lack of creativity, and the only mystery it raises is why you thought this was a good idea. Okay, at this point I'm gonna start making YouTube videos, because trying to answer this question while condensing all my thoughts into a 2-minute video for TikTok is going to be basically near impossible, especially whenever my answer is the episode Haunted from Teen Titans. Now, originally I was gonna save this review for my Halloween special later this year, but that's like several months away and this comment happened, so fuck it. This episode is so goddamn good, it's actually suspenseful and I watch it every year. And for me, that's because it treats this haunting like an actual haunting. And yeah, technically it's not an actual ghost haunting, but damn it, this episode can convince you otherwise, because if I didn't know the twist ending that this was all in Robin's head the entire time, I would have been 100% convinced that the show's greatest villain just came back to life as a ghost and is now tormenting the protagonist. But in one of the rarest cases I've ever seen this work, the twist that it was never actually real and it was all in a character's head actually makes the entire episode way better. It's a great psychological horror that tells you more about the hero rather than the antagonist, because the fact that this is not Slade just means that we're watching what Robin thinks of Slade the entire time. This is how Robin sees Deathstroke, a mastermind who can't be touched, someone he can constantly go to wits with, but ultimately he fears that he'll lose to. And with the idea that the show has been setting up the entire time that Slade is nothing more than a dark reflection of Robin, it gives the episode a probably unintentional but still really clever subtext on how Robin fears what he could become. And the rest of the cast are not pushovers either, they're still very much involved, with Raven and Cyborg constantly trying to level with him and be the voice of reason. But the more they fail and the worse Robin gets, just sells the panic more. You're constantly rooting for them to figure out what the hell is going on, that way they can actually be helpful before Robin's heart gives out. And Robin himself is characterized perfectly in this, because this is not how he normally acts. Yeah, he's a tight planner and constantly obsesses over things, but he's not normally to the point where he's fucking hallucinating. And while Robin has fought the team in previous episodes, that was usually because of coercion or some kind of secret setup, but he's never full on just threatened the team. There are also a lot of little touches in the episode that nobody really notices on the first viewing. Like, ever notice that Robin knows the 3 locations despite Slade never actually saying them? This is because Robin was looking at these 3 locations at the beginning of the episode and they're the exact same shots. Little touches like that are all throughout this episode and it gives it a lot of rewatch value. So if you like superheroes and you also like horror, give this episode a watch, it's definitely worth it. And whenever Halloween rolls around this year, definitely put this on your watch list.
I won't stop. Not now, not ever. I am the thing that keeps you up at night. The evil that haunts every dark corner of your mind. I will never rest, and neither will you.
Oh look, 2 birds, and I have this lovely little stone to throw. In all seriousness, it is actually really impressive that I've gone this long without mentioning ghosts up till now. But for me personally, I see ghosts as a really good opportunity and chance to dive into psychological horror. Throughout the majority of early human history, ghosts weren't really seen as a scary thing. They were usually just spirits of loved ones that showed up every once in a while to either help you out or give you advice. That is, of course, until medieval Europe and Christianity, would you just leave already, started coming around and rewriting lore again. And through that rewrite, they posed a question. If there's an entire afterlife out there, why on earth would a ghost want to be back here? This helped shift the focus away from ghosts being a nebulous background support thing into something way more personal that was tied to sin, grief, and some kind of unnatural being that didn't belong here. And the idea of a ghost having unfinished business that is tied to those negative attributes really took off, especially in the Victorian era. This is how hauntings became the horror trope that we see today. With individual housing tied to land ownership really taking off in this era, the idea of owning a home became a lot more personal, which really ended up tying the knot whenever it came to ghost hauntings, because it gave the idea that a ghost was here because of unfinished business tied to a house. Which finally brings me to 1963 with this beautiful gem of a film. Directed by Robert Wise, this movie introduces the idea of a ghost haunting being tied to someone's psychology. With the rest of the cast of characters being busy studying a house that's said to be haunted, the main character Eleanor is in the background going through her own psychotic episode, tied to fear, paranoia, loneliness, schizophrenia, and the general idea that there's no place for her to belong in the world. So you have a house that's very clearly and provably haunted, trying its damnedest to get her to stay so they can use use her as a host for a ritualistic sacrifice. And the entire movie is constantly trying to trick you into not knowing whether or not the haunting is actually happening, or if it's all in the head of our tortured lead as she goes more insane. Because despite everything that's going on, Eleanor in this movie has never felt more at home. She has no house, she has no support, she has no friends, even her car is stolen. So despite all the bullshit that the house keeps putting her through, she has this weird pull that makes her fall in love with it. The movie's very clever writing is constantly using the ghost as a representation and reflection of what the characters are thinking. So the characters who actually want to experience the ghost get a full show, and others who don't believe in them at all don't really get anything, which really torments Eleanor into losing her mind because she doesn't know what she wants. All she knows is that she feels more alive in this house than she's ever lived outside of it, and that obsession may end up claiming her life by the end of the movie. These ideas are so clever and so well written that later films end up using very similar ones for their own stories. And most stories about a haunted house usually follow the format of this film. In my opinion, I don't think enough people have actually seen this movie. Every scene is very carefully planned out, and the entire story is so well written. The script is fantastic, the acting is top notch, and it's genuinely terrifying. Even the fact that it's in black and white is also a very intentional artistic choice. So yeah, The Haunting is a really good movie, go watch it. And I'll see you guys next time whenever you guys inevitably ask me about Casper. Yeah, I should probably address that. For those of you who are unaware, I made a review of the Pokemon movie Darkrai the other day, and there was something about it whenever it came to how I structured my sentences. Because if you decide to go online and look up other reviews of this movie on YouTube, you're gonna find this one by Ilnej. Ilnej is a Pokemon content creator and rock band singer who used to make reviews of these movies. And one of those reviews was on The Rise of Darkrai. And I kind of accidentally ripped it off whenever I was recording my audio. Now, was this ripoff intentional? No, it really wasn't. I record my audio without a script. I do not plan these videos ahead of time whenever it comes to what I say in them. I only did that review in the first place because somebody requested that I talk about it. So whenever I was done with the audio and started looking up footage for the movie, I ended up accidentally realizing, fuck, I said the exact same things he said. And this isn't a situation where, oh, we just said the exact same points. No, I almost quote him directly. So I was in a really tough situation where I had to either record all my audio or just admit the fact that I'm ripping off one of my favorite creators. But I also had a secondary problem where I was having a lot of trouble finding footage of the movie, mainly because there's no free clips online, and if I wanted to download the movie, that's gonna be a whole process. So I made a final decision to just take Nej's video and download that. And I tried to re-edit the footage, that way it came off as more as an homage to his video rather than actually just making it a one-to-one copy. And the reason that I went with that route was because no matter how similar our points are, these are my thoughts on the movie. I'm a writer of my own book, and whenever I saw this movie, I just saw so much potential in it that I wanted to rewrite it myself. And while I did repeat a lot of points that Nej also made, I did go into my own points about the existential horror of the film that Nej never really talked about. But if you want to go ahead and call my video a ripoff, I'm honestly pretty much fine with that because that's kind of fair. No matter how much I tried to paint it more as an homage, I did repeat almost the exact same talking points and sentences, even going so far to use his edits of the movie and use it as my own. But in my defense, I do go in a completely different direction whenever it comes to my video, and he talks about talking points I don't even bring up. Hell, in a later video that I do almost a day later, I actually make a joke that's almost a one-to-one comparison to his joke. Doesn't work on a guy like me because I like my horror to actually have a narrative and a plot, with characters I can get emotionally attached to and ideas and themes that I can get really invested in case it wasn't obvious.
I know, I keep coming back to Pokemon 3. That's because I think it does a lot of things better than the other movies.
In case it wasn't obvious.
That was 100% intentional by me as a little in-joke to show that, yeah, I'm aware of the problem. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the judgment call is going to be on Nej, who I will tag in this video. So Nej, if you do end up seeing this and think that I should take my video down because you see it as nothing more than a ripoff, I will completely understand and will follow through. I'm just gonna say that it was completely unintentional and I did not mean that to be a ripoff. I'm gonna go ahead and leave the ball in your court as a sign of respect. We have created a lot of different vampire hunters. Do you know that? Between Van Helsing, Buffy, and the entire Belmont family, and among that count, we have had a few vampire-human hybrids. Some more worth remembering than others, but still, my point is that it's impressive how much Blade sticks out in the modern day. Now, I can't really speak on the comics, mainly because I never actually read those, though that's not really a problem for me because most of you know him from the movies, which honestly is completely valid because these movies are awesome. Well, at least the first two are anyway. My favorite thing about these movies is as fucked up as Blade's life is, especially with his backstory, the movies still go out of their way to make it fun by showing us that Blade really enjoys what he does. Like, this guy's whole deal is that he's a one-man army in a war against an entire underground society of vampires. A war that he partakes in willingly that nobody knows about but him. He's a vampire-human hybrid. His mother died in childbirth because she was bitten. He's lost friends, mentors, and allies to this war on a daily basis. He has no social life, he has no friends, and he has nobody to back him up whenever he's in a tight bind. He is literally the only thing that's holding back an entire vampire takeover. The only reason that vampires haven't taken over the world is because of him. And yet this motherfucker still has time to show off. Look at that shit-eating grin. He's having so much fun slaughtering an entire room of people. And that massive juxtaposition really helps whenever it comes to making Blade an interesting character, because the movies don't allow him to be flawless or heartless. Whenever Blade makes a mistake in these movies, he goes out of his way to make sure he fixes it. And despite having his entire life be secretive away from humanity, he still takes care of the individuals he comes across. Despite how stoic and rule of cool he is, he still allows himself to actually give a shit about the mission. Modern writing would take this character and make him cold and edgy, and turn his entire mission into him just lashing out against a group of people that ruined his life. But Blade is one of those people who actually gets the purpose of the mission. He sees the entire war as a job that needs to be done, and he's gonna be the one to do it. No matter how many vampires he's fighting in a given moment, if a human is in danger, they become the top priority, which allows him to be a cool character all he wants, but also keeps him admirable and respectable. I'm not gonna lie, before these movies, I never even heard of Blade, and I'm willing to bet that the majority of the mass public didn't know about him either. Don't get me wrong, the movies aren't perfect, the writing has a lot of flaws whenever it comes to the plot, but the awesomeness of the characters really do carry these films throughout all the issues, which is one of the reasons why that third movie failed. One of the many, many reasons. And before you ask, these are my rankings of the films, and if you're gonna set up Blade vs. Dracula, it better be this one. Hey guys, so I'm doing a thing, and in order to do that thing, I need to be transparent with you guys for a moment. So those of you who know my channel knows that every single video that I make on here is 100% request-based, and right now I'm sitting over 100. And don't get me wrong, I love that, I actually really do. The fact that I have that many people interested in what I have to say means the world to me. And even though I'm a small-time creator right now, I've gotten a lot of support with this channel, and it just feels amazing. I love getting the comments that I get with people trying to share their thoughts or just say that they like the video. Just knowing that you guys watch it at all just means so much. But right now I have to be transparent with you guys over the fact that these videos are not easy to make. Doing research, recording, and doing all the editing by myself takes about 2 hours of my day. Even more whenever the request is over a book or a movie or a TV show I haven't watched. And as much as I actually really enjoy the process, that doesn't change the fact that it takes a lot of time whenever I'm also doing a full-time job. As much as I want to make more, I can realistically only make 2 videos a day. So I'm setting up this little support system that way I can keep the content train going and not reach a burnout. I set up a link tree in my bio that leads right to my Cash App. So if you want to support me by sending in a donation, anything helps. Even if it is just $1, I'm not going to pressure you. I'm also now setting up special paid requests. These will help me organize, prioritize, and give the request the attention that they deserve. Now, sending money does not automatically guarantee a video. As always, picking a request will still be based on fit, interest, and timing. So if you request a TV show or a book that I have not read or watched, you will not be getting that video for a long time. So if you're going to pay money in order to get a request in, be smart about it or I will send the money back. Again, I'm only doing this so I can keep the content train going for the long term and I don't hit burnout. And don't worry, I will still be pulling requests out of the comment section. This is just here to help me keep up the pace. So thank you all for supporting me even if it's just watching. I genuinely appreciate it. Huh, that's actually a really heavy question. Because personally, I don't really think we have any good ghost characters in the modern day. Now, we have really good characters that happen to be ghosts, but aside from Carrie from Gumball, we don't really have any ghost characters that actually have a reason to be a ghost. Most ghost characters can eat, sleep, and physically interact with the human world. A lot of them are just ghosts to justify a gimmick, and even then it just comes down to a person but see-through. This is one of the reasons why I don't like the Casper movie. While I will give credit to the movie that they do actually acknowledge the fact that yeah, Casper is a kid and he's dead, most of the ghost gimmick is usually just used for cartoon slapstick humor, and the majority of the plot focuses way more on the preteen romance between him and Kat. For the sake of the narrative, Casper is still a ghost in this movie, but he still eats, sleeps, and still physically interacts with the human world. The fact that he actually has a past that includes him dying is only brought up in one scene, and after that, the movie never really brings up the idea of the torture of his new existence. But as much as I don't like this movie, at least it's not as bad as Ghost Dad. This is the problems that I was just talking about ranked up to 11. This movie sees all the potential potential that you can have with a main character being a ghost in a comedy and shoots it in the face. Remember how Beetlejuice was actually a good ghost movie? With the family vibes and the main characters being a young couple that died and are trying to reclaim the dignity of their home? With all the fun rules that actually explore the idea of being a ghost? And the funny, wacky idea of a bio-exorcist? Yeah, now let's do the reverse of that and stupid. With bullshit ghost rules that don't make any sense or logical through line. And really bad comedy that breaks those rules and is uncomfortably forced. How about a cast of characters where everybody's a fucking asshole? Oh, and the ultimate cherry on top of all of this, the fact that the main character has no reason to be a ghost in this movie. The entire plot of a dead man walking trying to get insurance money for his family before he goes off into the afterlife could easily have worked if you just gave him a deadline saying that, hey, you're about to die. But no, that urinal scene just had to happen. Bill Cosby himself wanted it. Yeah, bottom line, don't watch this movie. It's fucking awful. In my opinion, it is the worst ghost movie, it's the worst ghost story, and it has the worst representation of a ghost. For me personally, my favorite representations of ghosts is Carrie from Gumball and Beetlejuice. While I'm usually not a fan of kid ghost characters, mainly because that makes no sense unless you want to acknowledge the horrifying implications, the writers do bring up that aspect of Carrie as a character and fully acknowledge that being a ghost is not fun. Like, being an apparition is really cool, but it really affects on how she's able to bond and build relationships. Like the episode that actually brings up the fact that she can't eat food or even physically touch somebody. Whenever writing a ghost character, I have a rule in the back of my head that says that you have to keep in mind that being a ghost itself is a tortured existence. The life and connections that you had before are completely gone, you can no longer interact with the human world, and there's an entire afterlife that you're not getting to experience because you're still stuck here. Now, I know you can't do this with every example of a ghost, but it is something that I wish we got to see more of. The fact that mainstream media does not recognize Carnage as the comic book equivalent of a slasher villain is fucking disgraceful. Because as cool as Venom is as a villain and anti-hero, Carnage is fucking terrifying. Seriously, this guy is so goddamn freaky that I put him on the same level as Jason and Freddy. And that's coming from a guy who doesn't even like slasher films. Like, actually think about Venom and all the crazy powers that he has. The webbing, the super strength, the agility, the shape-shifting, even the fucking smile. Now take all that shit and put it in the hands of a fucking serial killer. And any of you who are expecting a tragic backstory, he has none. The most tragic his backstory gets is just revealing that he was fucked up from the beginning. And just for the non-comic book readers out there, you want to know why Carnage is red and Venom is black? It's because while Venom wears his symbiote like a suit, Carnage's suit is infused in his blood. Yeah, the thing that you're looking at, that's his blood that he's wearing. And your first thought to fend him off is probably like, oh, fire and sound, right? Well, excluding inconsistent writers, he got past that a long time ago. Over the years, he built up a resistance to both. The only kind of sound-based weapons that he's vulnerable to anymore are military grade. And you can't hit him with just a regular flamethrower anymore, you have to hit him with something as hot as the sun. And let's talk about his personality, shall we? You know, we haven't really seen Cletus Cassidy since 2019. Yeah, that's how much he loves being Carnage. He never takes that thing off. And during the storyline of Absolute Carnage, Cletus died. Yeah, Cletus Cassidy, the host of the Carnage symbiote, doesn't exist anymore. It's all the suit now. Cletus is now absorbed into the Carnage symbiote, meaning that this thing is now Murder City 24/7. Yeah, no human anchor, no psychology, not even a motive, it's just murder. And this is why I think he fits best as and should be recognized as a slasher villain. Even as a non-fan, I can recognize slasher villains being their best because they're forces of nature that you can't compromise with. They're unstoppable juggernauts that you can't do anything to except for run away. Nowadays, that's all Carnage is, but now with a cosmic horror aesthetic. He's basically a sentient walking chainsaw with random victims and no morality. Why does he kill people? Doesn't matter, he just likes doing it. And because of all these factors, he fits into a lot of different types of horror. Slasher horror, psychological horror, body horror, cosmic horror, existential. Most supervillains don't really fit the horror aesthetic, mainly because they have something holding them back. They have the weak vibes, motivation, psychology, even power scaling. Carnage takes all of that and throws it out the window, acting more like a natural disaster. And for the genre of superheroes, I think that's the best kind of horror that you're gonna get. And I just beat the purism allegations. I've said before on a few occasions that I don't really think that the Dracula book really aged very well. Not in terms of its writing, but in terms of the attitude that really surrounded the writing. Some of the writing and dialogue do use a few outdated terms that really aren't okay to say anymore, and some of the characters express beliefs that aren't very nuanced compared to modern day. But with that said, the actual content of the book in terms of its plot and narrative are actually very entertaining and worth remembering. And my biggest draw of the book whenever it comes to those things things is mostly the style. For those who haven't read this book, which I imagine is most of you, the book's story is told through journal and diary entries. There is no one narrator for this book. Every chapter is another entry written into somebody else's journal, which causes the audience and viewer to see the entire plot and narrative through the eyes of the protagonist, meaning that you never cut to what the villain is thinking. There is no chapter or scene where you get to see what Dracula is thinking about a given situation. All views on Dracula and how he works is based on third-party receiving ends or by looking at the people that he manipulates. And because of that, the abilities, lore, and explanation behind vampires is very limited to the viewer. And this type of aesthetic for a vampire is something that I really miss. Now, whenever you have something like Blade where the plot is more complicated and you need to see what the villains are thinking and planning, I completely get it. Like, you need that for that kind of movie. But if you're gonna use vampires for a horror aesthetic, I think bringing back the mystery element is a lot more fun. Vampires in the modern day are constantly being associated with sexiness and being seductive. And for somebody like me, I think that seductiveness only works best whenever there's a mystery attached to it. For me, the mystery element makes you want to know more. It makes you want to get to know this thing. But that want and desire to get to know it better puts you way too close until you're too late and you're a victim. Not in the way of physical intimacy, mind you, but in the way of general pure curiosity. Turning a vampire into an apex predator that's tied to manipulation. They're not the greatest monster in the world just because they're stronger and faster. They're the greatest monster in the world because on top of all of that, they're smarter than you. And whenever they know what you want and they know what they're able to do, they can get anything. All it takes is a kind word and a look your way. For me, the monkey's paw is actually like really fucking funny, mainly because nobody actually gets what the point of the monkey paw is. Because most people think that it's just a wish totem whose entire job is to be a dick and screw you over, when in reality, it was a horror story that called out lazy people. See, in the original story, there's an old man who's granted the monkey's paw. Whenever he finds out what it does, he uses it to immediately wish for a bunch of money. But whenever he gets the money, it's a compensation check, because outside there was a car crash and now his son is dead. So obviously grieving, he uses the paw again in order to wish his son back to life. But in order to revive his son, he comes back in a really grotesque manner. Like, yeah, he's alive, but not in the way that you want him to be. So in a panic, the man uses the paw again in order to return everything back to the way it was. Yeah, the point of the monkey's paw is not trying to outsmart it. The paw is a symbol of a test of character. And to prove the point that no desire, evil or good, is going to actually come to fruition without hard work. There is no cheating the system. There is no shortcuts. The dreams and desires of mankind are always short-sighted. And anybody who tries to find an easy way out to their problems is automatically a failure, which makes it really damn funny that everybody keeps trying to go all lawyer on this thing and try to outsmart it. Because not only are you showing that the story was right, but you're also showing that you didn't pay attention. They always make the exact same mistake, thinking that, oh, if I just use clever wording, or use some kind of clause like a contract, then I'll beat it, that way I can have a wish without consequences. But nobody knows the hidden rule about the monkey's paw, which is if you actually succeeded in that front, the paw won't grant the wish. Because nobody gets the irony that if you're actually clever enough to trick the monkey's paw, then you don't need the paw to begin with. Yeah, why do you need the paw if you're actually that clever? Seems to me that you're absolutely able to make your wishes come true and you're using a cheat code. And the original story itself would absolutely mock you for thinking that your grammar was the problem, when the real problem is the fact that you're trying to use a shortcut instead of actually going through the hard effort. I'm sorry, it's just so funny whenever I see somebody pull this shit. Not only proving the story right, but also being dumb about their own intelligence. Seriously, if you're a person out there that actually thinks that you can outwit the monkey's paw, believe me, you don't need it and you're actively nerfing yourself. Either that or your morality is really in the gutter. Trust me, you're absolutely able to actually make your dreams come true. You're 100% capable. All the tools that you need are right there, and it doesn't take a genie ripoff in order to get it done. But if you're a stubborn bunch and you still want to go all lawyer on this thing, then I hope you're happy whenever you get nothing out of it and realize that you're just standing there talking to the severed hand of a dead animal. Look, I don't know who the fuck told you that the Fae weren't horror-related, but whoever it was, they fucking lied. Because while this is a Fae and this is a Fae, so is this, and this. Yeah, the Fae were not like the pixies that you constantly see on DeviantArt. And the modern conception of them just being hot, attractive people that constantly have pointy ears and live in the woods is only like the third of the image that everybody zooms in on. Modern conceptions about the Fae are usually like the elves or the witches, and nobody realizes that the word Fae is a catch-all term that includes the Dullahan and the Nukkalavi. Yeah, the word Fae does not mean fairy. The word Fae meant any kind of spiritual being that was attached to nature and and lived in the woods. And ancient people, especially in medieval Europe, had a lot of reasons to fear the woods. The original idea of the Fae whenever it came to old mythology was basically a warning to not fuck with nature. Because if you did, something bad would happen to you. Piss off a hobgoblin, they burn your house down. Go swimming on a dark night, kelpies drown you. Stomp over a fairy circle, they steal your fucking children. Old Celtic folklore treated the Fae more like heavenly beings that were beyond your human nature. They saw humans as lesser beings that weren't worth their time. And if they did ever get involved, it was simply for the purpose of entertainment. We were toys to them. Even the time that they existed on was completely different to ours. Usually any story about people who spend their time in the fairy world for like a day, come back and then find out that 100 years have passed. We can't even trust these things to be morally consistent. Because in some stories you'll have a farmer who gets gifted gold because he was nice once. But other Fae will just flat out kill you if you step on a mushroom. Okay, so naturally the question is, where did the softening come from whenever it came to their image? Simple. Victorian England. Yeah, as society became more and more industrial, the fear of the forest kinda died out. Fear of death and survivalism became more and more irrelevant, and the image of the Fae got heavily romanticized as a result. So you have Disney, Tolkien, anime, romantasy books, D&D, all softening the image of the Fae into something more respectable rather than something more fearful and existential. So now you have the image of Fae being pretty and sexy and emotional and very human-like, and not the otherworldly beings that existed as a warning to anybody who fucks with nature and tampers with the natural order of things. But don't get me wrong, the old image of the Fae still exists in the modern society and people still fear them. May not be direct law, but Ireland's society does not pave over fairy circles. So if you want to go out into Ireland and take a walk in the woods, do yourself a favor. Don't fuck with the Fae. Okay, so whenever I first made my video talking about my new updated payment system, I really skimmed over a very important part. If you guys want me to start doing big detailed breakdowns, you're gonna have to do it as a paid request. You want me to talk about a full series? Ask it as a paid request. You want deep lore about a certain character from a really big franchise? Make it a paid request. If you want a more detailed breakdown of something that I've only mentioned, you're gonna have to ask as a paid request. Watching my videos come out daily probably makes you think that these videos only take a few minutes, when in reality behind the scenes, no, they take several hours to make. Between all the research, recording, and editing, I take several hours of my day to make these. Even whenever it's a video about something I'm already well versed in, that's still 2 hours of my day. I have a lot of requests that have piled up over the past few months. And I'm not gonna lie, for the most part, I'm only picking the easy ones. Because these kind of videos take a lot of time and effort, and these kind of requests are gonna take even longer. For you guys, it's quick and easy free content. But for me, it's several hours of labor. Labor I do enjoy doing, and it's really fun for me, but it's still labor nonetheless. And I can't keep doing that kind of request system for free whenever the requests get this big. Because just as a reminder, I'm a small creator, meaning I don't get paid by TikTok. Don't get me wrong, I'm still having fun whenever it comes to the questions that are very basic or general, and I have a blast whenever the question is something that's actually very thought-provoking. But if the request is over an entire franchise, a big topic, or something that takes a lot of effort, I'm sorry, but I can't do that for free. Likes and reposts definitely help out whenever it comes to reaching new audiences, but they alone don't make up for or support the time it takes to make these. So if you have a big topic, please just use the link tree in my bio. It helps me out a lot and also makes certain that I give the request the time and effort it deserves. God, it has been a long couple of weeks. What day is it? Oh shit! So, yeah, I planned to do this like a week ago and completely forgot, so let's talk about Romeo and Juliet. Because while my main brand is horror related, I am still a fan of classic literature. And for me, the modern misconception about Romeo and Juliet seriously needs to die. Like, die harder than Romeo did. Okay. In all seriousness, no, this is not a love story. It was never intended to be a love story, and everybody gets that point of the story wrong. Because whenever most people think about Romeo and Juliet, they usually think about the balcony scene, right?
I am too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks.
Oh, Romeo, Romeo. Wherefore art thou, Romeo?
Yeah, that's effectively their first date. But it's also the exact same moment whenever Romeo proposes to Juliet. Keep in mind, this is the second day of them even knowing each other. And after he proposes, they get married the next day. Yeah, a bit quick, don't you think? This entire relationship and marriage is based off of a meet cute and a one-night stand. And it is easily one of the most rushed relationships I've ever seen in fiction. Only being beaten by this, but I'm not talking about that. Seriously, there's not a single scene in this entire story where they have a full-on conversation. Their only attraction attraction to each other is literally just because the other one is hot. They know genuinely nothing about the other, not their likes, their dislikes, and who they are as a person. So if Romeo and Juliet isn't about the love story, then what the hell was the point of it? Especially whenever the first line in the book is literally a pair of star-crossed lovers lose their lives. Well, it's actually really simple because that's not the first line of the book. That line is part of an entire paragraph-long prologue explaining why they did it. And not a single line in that prologue is blaming the romance. Instead, it blames the families. This story was never about the romance of Romeo and Juliet. This story was about a family feud built on pointless hatred that went on for so long that two sheltered children thought that they found love. So whenever they accidentally made that mistake, they ran with it and started rebelling against the families. And it only got as bad as it did because both those kids were emotionally impulsive and didn't know any better. So whenever Romeo kills that one guy, commits suicide, and then Juliet follows him, that's only because no rational adult meaningfully stepped in. Throughout the entire book, Romeo and Juliet are described, referred to, and talked to like children. Like two dumb, horny teenagers who just found out what Tinder is. And this false love that they keep feeling is basically the equivalent of having a celebrity crush. Also, just a side note, Romeo and Juliet were not the only tragedy in this story. There's also the deaths of Mercutio and Tybalt. Mercutio being Romeo's best friend, and Tybalt being Juliet's cousin. Two extra collateral deaths in this story that didn't need to happen. But Romeo is too busy being a happy little idiot, Juliet is being too busy being a recluse, and Tybalt and Mercutio are just way too into the family feud. So whenever the plot finally takes hold and all the characters meet up in the square, yeah, no shit all of this was gonna happen. This entire story is nothing more than one massive idiot plot. Less of a romance like Beauty and the Beast and Pride and Prejudice, and more akin to a comedy of errors or a Three Stooges short, just with a way higher mortality rate. So yeah, Romeo and Juliet is genuinely a good story, but don't base your relationships off of it. The main couple is nothing more than a couple of horny idiots who think that they're adults who understand what love is, whenever in reality they're just there for the sex. On second thought, that actually is the perfect couple for the modern day. This book is fucking nuts! Since it was February, I thought it would be really fitting for me to actually review the original book of Beauty and the Beast. Because yeah, I love the original animated Disney movie, but not a lot of people know that it's based off of a French book. And this book is not only very different from the original animated movie, but it's also fucking insane whenever you get to the ending. When it comes to the main plot, the plot is basically the same. That is until the scene where Beauty exchanges her life for her dad's. Because in the book, Beast is the one that offers that negotiation, not her. And that's because Belle is not an only child in the original book, she has 5 sisters. And not only that, she doesn't really become a prisoner to the Beast. Yeah, no, she's just a regular tenant of the kingdom now, and she's allowed to leave whenever she wants. And when she goes home, her sisters are so jealous of her new setup that they try to convince her not to go back. And while the Beast in the movie is basically this raging, hulking asshole, in the book, he's mostly just really sorrowful and depressed, with his whole arc not being him trying to become more civilized, but instead him trying to get over his depression and self-deprecation. So his dynamic with Beauty is not like the animated film. Whenever it comes to Beauty falling in love with Beast, the problem is not about his attitude. The problem is the fact that he's 100% willing to try to marry her and he constantly proposes to her, but she won't do it just because she's fucking terrified of him. And her whole arc is just trying to learn that you have to love somebody based on their personality, not what they look like. So this story is not based on appearances being reflections of your own character. It's a romantic version of The Ugly Duckling. And the climax of this book doesn't even have Gaston and the townspeople going up and rioting. No, the climax is that Beauty went home, her sisters forced her to stay too long, and the Beast is now dying because he thinks that she abandoned him and is dealing with heartbreak. Because the Beast in this book is nothing more than a codependent emo kid. So she goes back, they kiss, and then it's basically the ending of the movie. Except it's not the ending of the book though, because now we have an entire quarter of this book left dedicated to lore dump. Yeah, I'm not kidding about that. The last quarter of this book is literally explaining the lore, like the fact that fairies exist, their politics, what they have to do with the Beast, and a twist that is so goddamn stupid it actually ruins the entirety of the story. Don't get me wrong, this lore dump is actually really damn cool. Like the fairy kingdom and how it works and what they have to do with the Beast is genuinely fascinating. But at the same time, what the fuck am I reading? I don't know what the original writer was thinking whenever she wrote all of this, but I don't care, this is hilarious. Fortunately, after she published the the original, she did come up with other writers and they rewrote an abridged version that just cut all that shit out. And now this is the version that all the new adaptations are based on. Now, whenever it comes to quality, is this book actually better than the animated movie? Fuck no, absolutely not even close. That movie was basically perfection. That movie was so good that it literally created a new subcategory for the Oscars. But at the same time, I still highly recommend this book. It is so fascinating. It is a very different story whenever you're coming off of the original animated movie. But the difference in the writing really gets you into the heads of both sets of creators. And the differences in vibe doesn't even make it feel like this is an adaptation. So I highly recommend this read whenever you're a fan of the original film and all the other adaptations. That is, unless your favorite adaptation is this one, in which case you're wrong objectively. So I was gonna film this on Valentine's Day, but my life decided to be a dick, so that just didn't happen. Oh, but Nebulous, why would you want to review The Great Gatsby on Valentine's Day? That's so weird. In one word, irony. In 6, because I thought it'd be funny. Because what's a better way to celebrate a corporate holiday centered around romance than by reading a book that tells you that it's all a lie? Also because this request is like really damn old and I need to get it done. Honestly, I have no idea why people try to argue that this book isn't a critique on the American dream. Because yes it is, very blatantly, and it does not try to hide it. When we meet Gatsby in this book, he is a very accomplished man. Small town kid, humble in origin, was a war veteran, got really rich, and is very generous whenever it comes to his money. In any other story, Gatsby would be a character that would be way too good to be true and have this dark secret hiding beneath him. But the twist is that Gatsby just is a good person and has aspirations that just aren't meant for this world. Because Gatsby is a guy who genuinely believes in the American dream. And in that perfect utopia, he would get back together with his childhood sweetheart and they would live happily ever after with friends and his wealth. But whenever he finally meets up with her again, she's rich, wealthy, and married off to somebody else and now is corrupted by the system. And anytime he tries to navigate the complicated web that is her personal life, it always ends up blowing up in his face. Because the narrative of the book is constantly beating down Gatsby because it genuinely believes that the American dream is a lie. There is no such thing as getting rich, getting married, and living happily ever after with no complications. The world is way too complicated for that clean of an outcome, and it's full to the brim of people that will actively get in your way for literally any reason that you can name. Whether or not you agree with the message is totally fine. You can think that the book is absolutely right whenever it comes to its analysis, or you can call bull all over that shit and think that Gatsby's dream is totally possible if you just play your cards well. But you cannot deny that that is the message that the book is trying to send. This entire book is literally just Fitzgerald going on a soapbox and yelling at us that the American dream is a lie. Whether or not you agree with him is completely up to you, but you cannot deny that that is the idea that he executes well in this book. And if you do disagree with that take, you can still enjoy the book without thinking about the politics. Because without all that subtext, this story is just another tragedy. Because Gatsby is this great dreamer with a lot of promise who genuinely believes in something that isn't real. Everybody keeps telling him, hey, this is gonna kill you if you keep trying this, and he keeps going anyway. And if you read a lot of classical literature like I do, you would immediately recognize that as the tragic hero archetype. And that belief in something that is way too good to be true ultimately is the thing that kills him. I would honestly make the argument that The Great Gatsby is still recognized today because of the tragedy element, not the political commentary. My main reason being because everybody calls this commentary bullshit. Some going so far to say that the commentary doesn't even exist. And yet every single person that makes that argument still likes this book because the story of Gatsby is genuinely heartbreaking. Literally on the exact same level as Death of a Salesman. It's just modern Shakespeare, plain and simple. Despite the intended commentary and the literal plot of this book, it does not have to be that complicated.
I just posted on my Instagram story about how Shrek is not a fairy tale. It's a cautionary tale, an example of how a woman cannot turn an ogre into a man, but he can make an ogre out of you.
Oh yeah, I'm absolutely jumping in on this. Because what you just said is so profoundly stupid, all it proves to me is that you didn't watch the movie. Because your entire argument is completely based and centered around the idea that Fiona grew up with all this crazy shit. Money, wealth, inheritance, land, and all this crazy cool shit that only exists in a materialistic setting. And according to you, she only gave all that up because one loser just showed any kind of sympathy for her after she was isolated for years. But you were completely skipping over the detail that Fiona didn't want any of that shit. She didn't care about the money, land, or wealth. All she cared about is the fact that she wasn't accepted by her own society. She was loud, crude, and gross. Everything that her society fucking hated. Her parents rejected her and locked her up in a tower because of it. Literally isolating her even farther away from the world, causing her nothing but loneliness. Sound familiar? And on top of all that, her parents then set up a guy with another kingdom to go and find her and set up an arranged marriage against her will. hell? This entire thing was not a trial to get a hot woman, this was conversion therapy. And the premise of the trial was so fucked from the start that Lord Farquaad tried to manipulate it, thinking that, oh, she's a hot woman and she's a princess, so obviously she's gonna go for me if I go and save her. So he sets the trial up on easy mode by sending Shrek in, and then tries to manipulate her even further by setting up a sting operation. And the problem with everybody in this situation is that nobody's asking what Fiona wants, except for Shrek, who is the only person in her entire life who actually accepts her for who she is. And in him, she finds comfort and therefore marries him. And whenever he finally meets those people that tried to manipulate Fiona, he also falls for the lie and changes. Because the entire plot of the second movie is everybody constantly trying to manipulate Fiona even further by saying, oh, this is what you like, this is what you enjoy out of life, well, we're gonna take that away and say that no, it's not. So whenever Shrek finally crashes the party and shows her what he did, she says, no, I don't like this, turn back into the man I fucking married. I have no idea why you thought it was necessary to try to force a feminist narrative out of this, because if you ask me, these movies are very feminist. If you focus on Fiona specifically whenever it comes to these movies, her entire life is everybody telling her what she wants, and nobody ever actually considers what makes her happy. Is Shrek a perfect husband? Absolutely not. But love as a concept is not trying to find a perfect partner. It's about finding a happy medium that both of you enjoy without compromising who you are. So for you to say that Fiona should have just shut up and went with the program just because she got some money out of it is an absolutely disgusting take that you should be ashamed for as a feminist. Go rewatch the films and try to see the story from Fiona's perspective, because actively ignoring that idea is the same reason why these people are the villains. My personal opinion, I genuinely believe that the Bride of Frankenstein can actually be a very interesting character and has a lot of potential whenever it comes to her writing. And I have seen this potential actually laid out in some works. Works that I personally don't like, but hey, at least they got her right. Yeah, I kind of just said that and didn't explain myself any further, and I've kind of been avoiding the topic ever since, which has caused quite a few people to ask why I don't like Creature Commandos. So I think it's finally time to bite the bullet and explain myself. I'm gonna start off by saying this. No, I don't think that this is a bad show. And no, my disdain for it is not because I don't like James Gunn. If anything, I actually am a James Gunn fan. I'm an absolute sucker for what he did with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I really like his Superman movie. But over the past few years, I've been noticing a lot of tropes in his writing that I just cannot get past. And the reason why I can't get past these tropes is because they take me out of the story and remind me, oh yeah, I'm watching a James Gunn project. Like the overindulgence in violence and gore, the Gunn team formula, the obvious political commentary, and the constant fridging. Look, I'm not against using gore in your story. One of my favorite movies is Terminator 2, and that uses gore as a tool to help with the storytelling. And in my werewolf transformation video, I said that I can see gore as useful whenever it comes to exploring your horror. When I have a problem with gore is whenever the blood and violence is overindulgent. Whenever the gratuitous violence is just there for the shock value or because the director is getting off on it. This is the same reason why I don't like Mortal Kombat as a franchise. But then you have the obvious Gunn team dynamic and the political commentary. When the team is full of a bunch of crazy weird assholes who all hate each other but learn to get along at the end, and the obvious commentary that the government keeps secrets and usually they're not good. If you like both these things, that's completely fine, but I kinda get tired whenever I see the exact same director keep writing the exact same damn thing. I don't like it whenever Stephen King keeps using his tropes over and over with no variety, so why should I treat James Gunn any different? Now again, this isn't bashing on quality, because if there's one thing that I absolutely love about this show, it is the character writing. What they do with the Bride of Frankenstein is absolutely ingenious, it's a clever twist, and I really like the character that it creates. Having everybody constantly dictate her own agency, causing her to fight them off in order to gain it on her own, is awesome. In my opinion, if you're gonna watch that show, just watch it for this backstory, it's really damn good. But as much as this show gained my trust and appreciation whenever it came to the bride, it then killed it whenever they killed off Nina. Which, yeah, no dancing around it, that's fridging. And that one writing mistake just made me circle back to all the personal issues that I have with this show. Which again, are personal issues, not issues with the quality. Because objectively, this is a good show and it's well written. But these are all tropes in the writing that I have personal issues with that take me out of the story. And it isn't just tied to James Gunn. James Cameron has tropes that I can't stand. Del Toro has tropes that I can't stand. And if you're part of the audience that aren't bothered by these tropes at all and don't care about them, then more power to you. Go enjoy the show. This entire video is not me bashing on a show that I think is bad. This is me saying that this is just something that I don't enjoy watching. Because at the end of the day, even if the show is good, personal taste is going to overtake quality in terms of priority. Whenever it comes to specific directors, style overpowers substance. And whenever the fingerprint of the writer is going to be louder than the story itself, then my immersion is gonna break. So if you enjoy this show, please go enjoy it. I'm just gonna advise to not get mad whenever somebody has a take that's more complex than your enjoyment. Okay, so I have talked about Wendigos and how they're not the same as Wachuges. I have explained how offensive it is to call a shapeshifter a skinwalker, and I have talked on multiple videos of why I don't like Bigfoot. So now let's finally talk about why a zombie and a ghoul are not the same thing! I'm gonna be really brief on zombies because I've already made an entire video about that, so let me explain to you what a ghoul is. For one, they're Arabic. To put it simply, they were basically desert spirits that hunted humans and ate the flesh of the dead. And for the people who are actually watching this video, you're looking at this image and noticing that that's not what a zombie looks like. And you're right to think that because a ghoul is not a zombie. In fact, they're not even human. They're demons. They're predators, they're shapeshifters, and they're actually really damn smart. They can shapeshift into humans, they can shapeshift into animals, they can even mimic voices. And their main method of hunting is basically acting like they need your help, that way you get too close and then they can jump you. They're not undead, they're not corpses, they're not even resurrected like revenants. Literally, all they are just trickster demons. So obvious next question is, how the fuck did this thing get confused for a zombie? Because looking back at my zombie video and explaining their whole origin, it's pretty easy to surmise that these two things have nothing to do with each other. Why does this make me so fucking angry? Simple, it's because the only connection that confused these two things together in the first place is really fucking stupid to the point where I have no choice but to laugh at it. At least with the Wendigo and the Wachuge, there was some kind of connection between the two things that actually made the confusion natural. But between a zombie and a ghoul, there is no connecting element between these two outside of the fact that they both eat human flesh. And I am not even kidding, that is the only reason they got confused. If anything, technically a zombie is kind of a ripoff of a ghoul whenever it comes to the flesh-eating thing, because a lot of early zombie writers fully admitted that they were just ripping off traits from other monsters like ghouls and Wachuges in order to lean into the cannibalism thing. But instead of everybody just saying, a zombie is kind of a ripoff of these things, the ignorance backfired and the term ghoul became associated with the zombie instead. Just saying this dumb shit out loud just makes me want to curl up into a ball and cry in a corner. Because this kind of confusion and mix-up is so fucking embarrassing and actually kind of hurts. Because now I know there's a monster out there in an ancient mythology that we're not using today that we absolutely should. And I know for a fact that this thing is never gonna get a revival because so many people have been making the exact same mistake for so damn long, it's never gonna get fixed. So yeah, this is not a Wendigo, this is a Wachuge. Stop using the word skinwalker, it's actually really offensive. Making a hoax out of Bigfoot is actually a lot more racist than you think. And a zombie and a ghoul are not the same thing. Oh boy, you're about to be really disappointed. For context, I had never even heard of this short film until you commented about it. And now that I finally watched it, damn it, that was a letdown. Quickly, I'll summarize it, then I'll get the good stuff out of the way, and then I'll finally talk about why it disappointed me. This is a 7-minute short film that is completely free to watch on YouTube. It has a really high production value, the pacing is really damn good, and the actress is nailing it. The setup of the entire thing is absolutely ingenious. As a Christian girl is setting up a presentation talking about a blank picture that apparently shows the face of God. There's a really effective part at the beginning where she starts playing a bunch of tapes back to back of several people trying to describe what they're seeing in the painting. But whenever she goes for a second take in the recording, she suddenly starts seeing something in the portrait. At first, we don't get to see what she's seeing. To us, it's still a blank picture, which is a really good effect because it leaves the idea of what she's looking at up to the audience's interpretation. Like, this is really good storytelling. This is really effective horror. I can't wait to see where this goes, and we can see it. In fact, we can see a whole lot of it. Great! Why? Why would you do that? Why would you show us what it looks like? Oh, but Nebulous, it doesn't show the entire thing. Fuck you, it shows me enough. Like, do you not understand how important it is to just leave things up to interpretation? This is like if you actually showed us what was in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, or if the top falls over in Inception. There are just some things in storytelling that the audience is better off not seeing. Like, imagine this entire short film, but instead of seeing this creepypasta bullshit, we didn't get to see what she saw. Wouldn't that be creepier? Wouldn't wouldn't your mind just constantly want to fill in the gap instead of seeing these weird glowing eyes in the background? Because whenever you have the idea of a portrait of a picture of God that is left up to the interpretation of the viewer that nobody can see but the protagonist, this is not the scariest thing that I can imagine. Look, I have no idea what my mind was trying to make up whenever it came to interpreting what she was seeing, but it wasn't that. I can assure you, hands down, money on the table, whatever the hell my mind came up with in those moments was 100 times scarier than whatever the fuck you just showed me. Look, calming down a bit, I understand that this is an independent production, not a massive studio film, and I'm probably overreacting. These people probably put a lot of effort and time into making this, and I am really proud of them. The production, like I said, is amazing. This actress is killing it. I cannot wait to look her up later and see what other projects she's been a part of. But I'm sorry, whenever it comes to the twist of the writing, it just fucking sucks. I was having the time of my life until they showed me the hand. This could have been a really cool horror aesthetic whenever it came to challenging faith, in a way that didn't even knock against Christians. But now I feel robbed of an opportunity to see something cool, which ironically would have been centered around not seeing something. Whatever, just chalk up another point to creepypasta ruining something that could have been way cooler. My best wishes to the production and my best wishes to that actress. And to any fellow horror writers who actually want to write something cool like I just described, please go do it. Just please do not make the same mistake that these guys did. Oh boy, let's try to make this entertaining. Just a heads up, I'm not going to be using a lot of heavy imagery in this video, mainly because I don't want this video to get taken down. In a lot of modern horror and media, we constantly have this prevailing audience and voice that says that horror cannot exist without gore. And this is quite funny to me, mainly because whenever it came to early media and whenever it was developing, there was a lot of agencies constantly censoring that shit. From movies to comics to books to even your fucking music, all of these things were constantly censored by some kind of agency. Blood was very rarely ever seen in film, violence was very minimal, and whenever it came to things like assault, they were only mentioned and implied. And naturally, this pissed off a lot of people who wanted their stories to have some damn teeth. So whenever the 80s finally rolled around, the genre of splatterpunk was finally formed. While most horror media at the time were finally starting to conform and dip their toes into that kind of stuff, splatterpunk just put all of it on the table without any subtext. And while the genre is basically dead in the modern day, it did have a massive impact that got gore back into horror, and horror finally had teeth again. It was a big hit, it had a massive audience, and it paved the way for a lot of change in horror that still exists today. But while I do have a lot of respect for splatterpunk for its historical context, that doesn't mean I'm a fan of it. Look, the main mission of splatterpunk was to try to get gore back into the media mainstream of horror by putting blood and guts back on the table. But my problem is, once you put all of that in the forefront, what else is left behind it to explore? Like I've said on multiple occasions, I don't mind gore. But just like every other aspect in media, gore is nothing more than a tool that's supposed to help you with the storytelling. So if you're gonna make a project where all of that is in the forefront and nothing else is gonna be behind it whenever it comes to subtext, then the only aspect in your entertainment is nothing more than the shock value. And to repeat the words of good old Alfred Hitchcock, you can only really surprise your audience once. The biggest problem with splatterpunk, in my opinion, is the fact that there's no real rewatch value because the idea of the genre doesn't challenge you. There's no intellectual, emotional, or thematic ideas or values that are actually in splatterpunk, and you cannot deny that. The entire genre literally exists in spite of all of that. And don't get me wrong, I understand why people like this kind of stuff. They like that shock value, they want to be grossed out. It's like an adrenaline rush that they constantly get addicted to that only this kind of genre will give them. But my kind of problem is that people put this kind of stuff on the same praise as something like Dracula or Frankenstein, which you cannot deny is an unfair comparison. These kind of stories use themes and fear in order to challenge the audience and make them think. There is intent and careful planning whenever it comes to their craft. But genres like splatterpunk and creepypasta actively don't do that. These genres only use fear as an entertainment value in order to shock the audience once. Fear is not a tool to these kind of creators, it's nothing more than a reaction that you can get from an audience. And as a writer, if all you're focusing on is the audience's reaction to your story, then your story will not have any rewatch value. And just to prove my theory, how many of you people actually go and rewatch things like Nightmare and Friday for the story aspects? Again, if you like this kind of stuff, that's completely fine. Go enjoy your junk food. Just don't put your McDonald's Happy Meal on the same level as a gourmet meal.
Boy, get your ass out of here with that!
Question for vampire experts. If a vampire is welcome into your home, does that just extend until the next doorway in your home? If they get through the front door, and then they like start attacking you. If you go and run and hide in your bedroom, do they then need to be invited into your bedroom because there's a new doorway?
Short answer, no. Long answer? Look, if we're gonna analyze this thoroughly, we have to understand why this rule exists. Because in all fairness, whenever you think about it for too long, this is a really weird rule for vampires. They're suave, classy beings that are actually monsters that want to suck your blood. Why on earth would they need permission to enter your house? Well, turns out this wasn't a rule directly for vampires. This was an old European folklore belief system that was tied to thresholds and boundaries. In the same way a human isn't supposed to trample all over a fairy circle, spirits, witches, and demons were not allowed to enter your house without your permission. This was symbolic for purity and safety, but also a representation of the boundary between the natural and the supernatural. So whenever vampires started entering the local belief system, they also picked up this rule. And whenever Christian theology finally got involved, the belief system of this idea started to double down really hard. Because Christian theology has this thing where evil doesn't happen unless you allow it, which is a whole thing I'm not gonna get into. So with vampires being seen as this corruptive force that infects you, the idea of your house being a safe space kind of became a really big deal, with your very home becoming your last line of defense that you have complete control over. And the act of letting something like a vampire into that home was seen as you just giving up all of that. You had officially surrendered your safety and given the power to them. Now, how this rule exactly works in the details is really up to the interpreter. For some people, your safe space changes whenever you're under attack. So once you enter something like your bedroom or your bathroom, it might reset the rule. But for most people, once you allow somebody to enter your house, they basically have free roam of the place unless you tell them otherwise. So whenever a vampire enters the house, they basically have free reign. But since you can easily make an argument in favor of either of these two cases being more accurate than the other, I'm just gonna pick the easy middle lane and just say that's completely dependent on the homeowner. Huh, that's actually a really good question. I genuinely don't know where that came from. Let me look it up. Oh my god! Holy shit! Oh my god! Okay, before I reveal this, keep in mind, this was a long time ago and they legit did not know any better. So, a lot of people at the time of these legends being written had, let's just say, quirky personalities. And they had certain tics to them. Like the need to have everything in a specific order, having very odd speech patterns, and of course, having a compulsion to overanalyze every single detail of a given situation. You know, like an autistic person. So, which part of the spectrum do you think that Dracula was on? Okay, calming down a little bit, that's not entirely fair. The specific condition that this kind of vampiric behavior most likely resembles can actually be associated with a lot of neurodivergencies. While I personally made the connection to autism, it also is associated with OCD, ADHD, and some anxiety disorders. But back then, whenever these legends were being written down, those kind of terms did not exist. They were just seen as weird things that people do and were considered unnatural behavior. So, following the logical through line at the time, if you see somebody acting not normal, you immediately associate them with a monster. And vampires were not the only monster that was actually associated with the rice thing. This kind of weird character trait for monsters originated over in the East. The counting rice thing was only mentioned by Bram Stoker whenever it came to Dracula, only because he was referencing the Eastern Asian mythologies. Now, with all of that said, within the modern day, as an autistic person, do I find this offensive? No. Look, whenever it comes to the old civilizations and societies that wrote this kind of stuff down, they didn't know any better. Would I be upset if this kind of belief system continued into the modern day? Absolutely, but back then they just weren't informed. I'm not gonna waste my time being mad at a bunch of dead people who wrote down something that they just didn't have better knowledge about. Instead, I'm gonna have fun sitting here pointing and laughing at them for making a mistake that bad. We've moved on so much as a society that getting hung up over old trivia like this is literally meaningless. With all the crazy bullshit that's going on right now, both on the big scale and in my personal life, this kind of bullshit is the least of my worries on things to get upset over. Do I find it offensive? Not really. Do I find it funny? Absolutely. Do I think that we should keep this trait about vampires? Not really. Without a modern explanation to explain this weird character trait about vampires, I don't really think that there's a way to make it make sense. You know, unless the vampire is this guy. And if you're gonna go with the original explanation that all those other legends were based on, you're gonna risk saying something that's really damn offensive. In my opinion, unless you can create a new modern explanation behind this weird trait about vampires, I say just forget about it unless you're using it for comedy. Okay, one more laugh for the road. Ooh, this should be fun. Favorite vampire movie is actually really damn hard, mainly because there are just so goddamn many. For me, it's personally a fight between the Batman vs. Dracula, the 1992 Dracula film, and the first Blade movie. Batman vs. Dracula because I just really like how they portrayed Dracula in this film. 1992 Dracula mainly because it's the closest that we've ever gotten to a movie actually being accurate to the book. And the first Blade movie because it's just really fucking awesome. Now, picking a werewolf movie is a lot harder, mainly because I don't really tend to watch those, and the ones that I do end up watching aren't very good. But if you had to twist my arm and make me pick, I'm gonna go with the original Wolfman movie, mainly because it set the standard. Not just in how this monster can be used in a movie, but how this monster works at all. But if you allow me to cheat a little bit, I'm just gonna go with the MCU special of Werewolf by Night. Now, I'm not gonna answer what my favorite Frankenstein movie is, mainly because I already have a video talking about that, so I'll just link that in the caption. Favorite ghost movie is The Haunting from 1963, fuck the remake, and my favorite Invisible Man movie is actually the original 1933 one. As good as the other ones are, this is the one that gained my respect, mainly because I've read the book, and that book is not easy to make a movie out of. They had to go into overtime to rework the original story in order to make this actually character driven. And, you know, not boring. Creature of the Black Lagoon, come on, use a brain cell. And my favorite Jekyll and Hyde movie is actually the fucking Hammer film, which is hilarious because this movie does not follow the original story of the book, but it is so damn good regardless. It's a truly fascinating take that takes the original premise in a whole new direction that I have a lot of respect for. And this entire movie acts like a character study on their version of Dr. Jekyll, who was a way more interesting character than he was in the book. And my biggest sell on how good this movie is that the acting is fucking phenomenal. Like, yes, this is a 70s movie and it is very fucking silly. There are a lot of moments in this movie where the acting is very over the top. But in my opinion, the movie works so well with that over the topness, mainly because they know when to hold back and when to let loose. And the guy who's playing Jekyll/Hyde is fucking killing it. Again, yes, his makeup is very obviously silly looking, but god damn it is his acting great. Not only does he pull off making me sympathize with this version of Jekyll, but he also makes me terrified of this version of Hyde. Because in the book, until he murders the old man, Hyde is basically nothing more than your run-of-the-middle jerk. But here, he starts off as an alter ego for Jekyll to use to try to get himself to let loose a little bit. But the more that he indulges in it, the more that side of him comes out harder and harder into a full-on alternate personality. But where book Jekyll was nothing more than your run-of-the-middle asshole, this guy is a full-on psychopath. And the guy playing both characters really sells the dual personality situation. Whenever he starts yelling and freaking out because he can feel Jekyll taking over again, I genuinely believe it. But yeah, those are my favorite monster movies whenever it comes to the original lineup. Let me know if you want to hear more. Shout out to Efficient, thanks for the support. To me, there are some massive qualifiers to keep in mind whenever discussing what my favorite vampire is and what makes a bad vampire in my eyes. So in order to answer the question properly, I'm gonna list off my qualifications. 1. The design. Whenever there is a vampire in your story, you have to have a small collection of traits in order to call that thing a vampire. 2 fangs, pointy ears, pale skin, red eyes. You can add extra details like a second form or evolve the vampire into something new like in Blade 2. But the base design details have to be there or the new design have to follow the vibe. 2. The powers. I've gone on multiple videos talking about how bullshit vampire powers are and how they have way too many, but there are some base ones that I do think are essential. Transformation, hypnosis, the blood drinking, the bat motif, and enhanced agility and strength and speed. Same logic applies to 3. Weaknesses. They must be allergic to garlic, they must burn in the sunlight, and they can only be killed by a stake to the heart or full-on decapitation. Holy water burns their skin, and holy symbols repel them. If your vampire has no weaknesses like these, then they're overpowered and busted. And finally, 4. Their character. Their character and personality must be tied to their vampirism. From their philosophy to their worldview to the choices that they make in the narrative, everything that they do must be tied back to them being a vampire. If this is not true about them, then being a vampire is nothing more than a cosmetic. Now, with all of that laid out, I have 2 candidates for my favorite vampires and 2 candidates for the worst vampires. First favorite vampire is Spike from Buffy. Not only does he follow most, if not all of my rules, but he's also like a really good modern interpretation of a vampire. Don't get me wrong, he is very dated whenever it comes to the tropes in his writing, mainly due to the time that this show came out. But whenever you look past that, I believe that this is what a vampire would be like in the modern day. Making him an unholy monster that's still trying to deal with the fact that he has human emotions is a great way to take a character. If you took vampirism out of the equation, then Spike would not be the person that he is. Which leads me to my absolute favorite vampire in media, Carmilla from Castlevania. Literally everything that this woman does in the narrative is tied to her being a vampire. From her sexism to her narcissism to every single choice that she makes in the narrative. Literally her entire personality and all of her characteristics come back to her superiority complex about being a vampire. This woman hates humans so much that she'd rather nuke herself than be killed by one. From what I've been able to gather, she is next to nothing like her game counterpart, but I don't care. This characterization is perfect.
You already have a nice castle? Why would you want his?
Because I take things away from stupid, evil old men. It's what I do. I've always done it. They deserve to lose everything, and I deserve to have all their stuff.
You could just make new things.
Why would I waste my time when I can just take whatever I want and then kill whoever had them?
Now, my two least favorite vampires kinda hurt to say because they come from products and series I actually really like. First, we have the Magnus Archives and Miss McDonald. Look, I love this podcast, but this episode fucking pissed me off. Literally, nothing about this screams vampire. And the narration goes on and on trying to justify, oh, you don't know what a vampire is, this is what a vampire is. And you can try to make the excuse that the narrator was just making shit up or was crazy, but the episode never fully acknowledges that idea. Again, I love this podcast, but I hate this thing. There was only one vampire in fiction that is actually worse than this, and that's... Hi, Dio. Listen, I love JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as much as the next guy, and I love Dio as a character and as a villain. He is narcissistic, egotistical, has a superiority complex, perfect for a vampire. Out of all the rules and qualifications that I've set up, Dio hits number 4 the most. His entire personality and characterization being completely tied to his vampirism hits almost as hard as Carmilla, if not even more so. But if he is really that high on my list whenever it comes to meeting my qualifications as a vampire god, why is he my least favorite? Simple, because as much as he rules at number 4, he fails on every other account. Which makes it really damn funny whenever he has that much pride in being a vampire whenever he's not actually a vampire. He doesn't have the pointy ears, his skin tone is the exact same as a human, he sucks blood through his fingers, making the fangs completely useless, he doesn't transform, he has no bat motif, and he doesn't hypnotize anybody. All he's got is the strength, speed, and agility, which makes him nothing more than a super soldier. And for some reason, sunlight still hurts him. Even though whenever you get to the base definition of what a vampire is, Dio does not qualify. I love this psychotic son of a bitch, but dude, you are not a vampire. I'm sorry, but no matter how good of a character Dio is, he ranks at the bottom of my list. So in the future, if there are any writers in my audience and you want to write a vampire, do a this, and a this, not a this, and a this.